Hi, good evening. Namaste. Welcome to all of you, and welcome to this evening's very meaningful conversation with Dato David Gurupatham. Please say hi and leave your comments. We want to try to make this session as interactive as possible. So we look forward to getting your feedback and your questions. Right. So while all of you check in, I'm just going to start with my introduction. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Shailaja Menon, and I have been a yoga practitioner and teacher for over 20 years now. I began my journey in Coimbatore, India with integral yoga and continued in Malaysia with my teacher, Manoj Kaimal. Along the way, I set up my own yoga studio, Mat and Beyond Yoga Studio here in Malaysia. And I also became an author with my book, Yoga Shakti, being published in 2018. All along, I also had another concurrently running passion, which was writing. And I have been writing for even longer than I have been practicing yoga. And it was in that capacity as a writer and editor that I first met Dato David. I was very inspired by his story when I first heard it. And I'm not sure if he remembers, but I even asked him to write a book at that point. So, well,
Um,
for now, we are going to have a conversation with him and hear it from the man himself. So, before we go into the questions, I would just like to go over his profile to give you a better idea about what he does. So, Dato David Gurupadam was called to the bar at the Honorable Society of the Middle Temple, London in 1992 and has been practicing law for almost 30 years. Managing partner of DGK, David Gurupadam and Co. Dato David is also involved in business with several tech companies like fintech and blockchain technology. He's also an advisor to many government and non-governmental entities and corporations. He is a prominent member of the Malaysian Bar and is involved in several public interest cases. An adventurer, a traveler, a fan of extreme sports, and a car collector amongst his other passions, which also include reading, playing the piano, and writing. He's also the proud father of his two children, Ashwin and Ashton Gurupadam. I first interviewed David more than 3 years ago for an arthritis magazine, Joint Efforts. I was very inspired by his story even then, as what came through was the strength and spirit of the human will to transform and do whatever was necessary to reclaim quality of life. And I wanted to share his story with as many people that it is possible to overcome health challenges and live well. Sometimes we take it as a death sentence and we kind of just accept our lot and not really try to change it. So I'm really hoping that his story will inspire us to really do something because we do have the capacity to make changes. And I also wanted to shine the spotlight on basic but very neglected values of eating healthy, exercising regularly, sleeping well, managing stress, and of course, a great attitude. Yeah, so with these words, I welcome David Gurupadam to our show. And I begin with the first question. So he has many things to say, so I want to get started as soon as possible. Let's start at the very beginning. What age did you discover that you had arthritis? So there are two, three questions here, so just bear with me. And what was going on in your life at that point? And what were the first symptoms, and what was your reaction at an emotional level? Like, how did you accept that?
oh dear. That's
Yeah,
hello,
I know
hi,
it's
I'm
many
David
questions.
Gurupatham, and sorry, it's okay. Thank you, Shailaja, for inviting me onto your amazing show that I watch all the time. Okay, well, I was diagnosed with three types of arthritis in my late 30s. Uh, so I woke up one morning and I was in a lot of pain in my joints. I actually thought I fell down from the bed while I was sleeping. It happened again, and then someone suggested that I seek medical assistance. So I went to Pantai Hospital to a very prominent doctor who did some tests, and he gave me some really bad news. He says you have it's very rare, but you have three types of arthritis, and he said I had rheumatoid arthritis, I had psoriatic arthritis, and I had spondylitis, and it was probably hereditary. My dad suffered from psoriatic arthritis and rheumatoid arthritis. And on my mother's side, my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, was suffering for many years with spondylitis, and she was virtually hunchback um, in her later years before she passed on. And so I was, a young man at the top of my career, and I was just getting things organized. My family, daughter was just born. It hit me like a ton of bricks,
I'm sure.
and so I said, of course, I mean, I knew from how my father suffered and my maternal grandmother suffered, but you just turn a blank and you say, hey, okay, doctor, tell me, is there a cure? There must be a cure.
Yeah.
And he goes, I'm sorry, David, there is no cure. But the regression of this thing is quite severe. And so I said, well, tell me about this thing, So he says, well, unless you manage this properly, what will happen is eventually with the rheumatoid arthritis, you will have fever. But this is a very debilitating disease. And you are likely to suffer a lot in pain over the years. But as the calcification takes place in the joints, a lot of it will become irreversible, and it will affect your movement and your joints. Um, and it's likely that it will affect your ability to walk. And because the spondylitis is so prevalent, you will your back is already affected. And I didn't know my back was affected. And he showed me an X-ray where the four lumbar parts of my spine were actually fused, my lower back. Um, and that shocked me, the idea that at 39, I was going to face a possibility of maybe not even being able to walk properly. My spine, going to bend. And then, and some of the effects of it, yes, my spine, has got a few four joints that are fused. Some of it, like, I don't know if you can see this in the camera, like my finger, you'll find that the calcification there is permanent. And so I've lost really the use of one finger. So when I play the piano, I actually play with not 10 fingers. I have to manage. Um, so, and it was caused by stress, as usual. It was something that I realized after some time. Um, I underwent a very stressful period just before I was diagnosed with arthritis. My wife, um, 15 years ago, she had been diagnosed with breast cancer. And it was quite a difficult time for us as a family. My daughter was just born, my son was very young, and the prospect of my children growing up, without their mother was very stressful. Plus the fact that I had her treated in Mount Elizabeth in Singapore, so I had to take her, and she had to come back from Singapore with and managing the chemo and all of that. Was a very stressful period of my life because I also naturally have to work and manage all of that. And so soon after, I think a few weeks after her last session of chemo, uh, that was when I first felt the pain. And that was 15 years ago. How long did I suffer with it? Easily about 10 years. I was treated by the rheumatologists at Pantai Hospital who did a fabulous job. Initially, they started with methotrexate drug, which basically the situation is where your immune system goes out of control and your immune system actually attacks the joints. And methotrexate, as I understand it, is a low-end sort of cancer type drug, which actually
I just give us a second. I'm sure David will come back. Must be some Wi-Fi glitch. So I see David
Yeah.
joining us.
I'm sorry, we kind of got disconnected there. So,
It's okay.
so what happened was, so they put me on methotrexate. They increased the dosage of methotrexate. It didn't work, and the pain started to become very unbearable, especially in the mornings. And it was really very painful, and psychologically, I used to think, uh, this is worse than a life sentence because it's a life sentence of pain, when you're young and, people tell you there's no cure and this is the best they can do and taking the medicine and doing everything and it's not working, and you're in pain every morning, I will wake up before the azan, and I would sit down and I would wait for the painkillers to work or, just sort of to thaw down before I could walk. At the height of the disease, I was actually having to walk with a walking stick. My toes were, and until today, my toes are all out of shape. They're all disfigured. As you can see, some of my joints are. And I was obese because obviously you can't exercise. I used to be very active before that. I used to play football and things, and so it was, I could see my life just passing by, and I felt it's a very psychologically debilitating disease as well as physically because
Absolutely.
human beings need hope. You know what I mean? Without hope, human beings just cannot survive. And for me, the fact that there was no hope because the medicines weren't working. And then towards the end, on the ninth year, uh, as the treatments started to progress, they had something called biologic medicines, and I was put on a medicine called Symphony, which was an injection, a drug that I had to inject every week, and it was very expensive, I must say, but it was something that I needed so that I could go to work and function. Um, so the upshot of it was, 10 years of real pain. It was like torture. Um, but then, I didn't. I'm not one. I'm not the kind of person that takes things as they are. I'm someone that doesn't accept no for an answer. I always feel there's a way. But I think it was also good for me to go through that period in hindsight, looking back, because during that period, I think I connected with my spirituality. I connected with God in a way. I connected with myself, trying to understand everything, understand myself. And so, in a way, uh, there's a lot of good when I look back now, of that. They say adversity maketh the man. And I think that made me, in many ways, the man that I am today.
Yeah, so I just want to say hello to so many of the people who are watching here. My aunts from Coimbatore. I have Kaustubh there, who's also a very has come on the show several times. I have Surendra Mehta ji, who says he's watching from Los Angeles, and then I have so many other people. My cousin Manju from Singapore. So welcome all of you to the show. Thank you for taking your time, and thank you for joining in on our conversation. And I truly hope to hear from you all, and really hope that it creates some kind of impact for all of you. So I was actually sent to interview him because with his arthritic condition, he had actually climbed Everest Base Camp. And that in itself is a very interesting story. So I'm going to let you tell him all about that, how he came to that decision to climb Everest Base Camp in that, very, very difficult situation he was in, where, he just mentioned he was obese at that time. He's not really physically fit because of the medication. And he had so much of pain in his joints. It was very hard to even, get out of bed, get to work. So I'm going to let David tell you how he came to that decision to, actually climb base camp.
So anyway, at that point where you could say maybe I was considered defeated, beaten by this disease, and I was at that stage where I accepted, okay, well, this is how it's going to pan out. The rate it's going to be very difficult to be mobile very soon, and the back as well is getting fused, and it compounds things because when you suffer, especially at night, when there's a change in temperature and you can't sleep because of the pain, it compounds, so you don't get enough sleep, you're obese, you get exercise, it just gets worse and worse and worse. Anyway, so at the worst part of it, when I came and said, fine, all right, this is my life, it's going to be like that. It's there for a reason. I may not be able to walk very soon because as I said, I was being treated by some of the best doctors in town, and they were monitoring everything, and the kind of medicines that I was taking as well required monitoring because, like, the biologics and all, they turn off your body's ability to understand and fight a disease. So if there was a fever, my body wouldn't be able to recover or fight the disease because it suppresses the immune system. Yes. So and then so at that point, when I thought, okay, this is it, this is my life, I can't do anything about it, I told myself, you know what, if I'm never gonna walk again normally, then I am going to climb a mountain. And it does not matter if I take 500 steps or 50 steps or 5 steps, I'm just going to do it. And I'm going to find the tallest, biggest, toughest mountain to climb. Even if it was just to try it and just say, hey, you know what? I'm just going to walk, even if it's for 1 hour, fine. So I signed up for this hike up Everest to base camp. And then I watched all the videos on it and was going like, okay, fine. I'm never going to make it to the top, maybe, reach the first tea house. And I will sit there and have tea and wait for everybody to come down and tell the view and say, hey, you know what? I took a few steps up Mount Everest, But, I started to hike and it was painful. Every step was painful. Every step of the way. And I eventually reached base camp after 9 days. But the scale of it was a mental, it was more of a mental challenge than a physical challenge. After a while, it's not the pain anymore, it's the will to take the next step. And so for 9 days, all I could think about was keep moving forward, just taking that one step, just taking the next step. That's all I could think about. Just take the next step. Just take the next step. And you know what? Just taking one step at a time. After 9 days, I did reach base camp. But what had happened was that on the 6th day, because my knees were already swollen, they started, my knees and my joints, but mostly my knees, they were almost the size of a very small football. And one of the hikers there was a doctor from India, and he said, "Young man, you're mad. You have to go down now because it's going to get infected. And and up there's no medicines, and you're susceptible to many things." But I just felt it was my, there was something that I had to do. And on the 7th day, I started to run a fever. And everyone was telling me, go down, go down, go down, But I told myself, it's 2 days. I've come this far. I am not giving up. Maybe it was a bit foolish. And I wouldn't recommend anybody do that on a mountain because I've climbed many mountains since then, by the way. I wouldn't recommend that because I think it's very foolish, and it was foolish of me, but I think it was very important that I did it at that time. And so I climbed the last 2 days, running a very high fever. In fact, if you on my social media, or if you've ever seen one of the pictures of me on base camp, you'll see I'm just wearing a t-shirt and everybody's wearing something else because I had to cool myself down. Uh, and then I had to be helicoptered down because there was no way with my knees the size of small footballs that I barely could take another step. I mean, I was just out of it. And so they took a helicopter, picked me up, from Gorakshap, I think it was. And I was rushed to a private hospital in Kathmandu where they kept me for 2 days. And they removed 50 cc's of fluid from each knee and gave me antibiotics and things like that to stabilize everything. But it was such an amazing mental journey. It just after that, nothing. Once you climb Everest, you know what? Nothing comes close because you say, "Hey, well, I've done Everest. What's this? Bring it on!" So your attitude changes. So, but that changed my whole life. That one hike just completely changed my attitude, my mind, my physical body, my everything just changed.
Yeah, I remember telling me at that point that how it completely changed your attitude, as in you realized that your will was so strong and that you could actually do it, and you decided to do something about your disease as well, and you started doing your own research at that point.
Yes.
And you said that the word that came up very often in all your research was inflammation, and that was
Yes.
considered like the root cause of so many diseases, including what you were going through. And how when you read up on inflammation, you also realized that your diet was one of the key factors to increase or reduce inflammation. So can you just take us down that journey as well?
Sure. So as I said, as I climbed that mountain over 9 days, it was all about saying, I'm
One
gonna
step.
make it one step, just keep taking one step forward, just keep moving forward, just take one step, keep moving forward. And I told myself when I came down, uh, my mindset, I learned one lesson going up, and I'll tell you about the lesson I learned coming down. But the lesson I learned going up was the impossible is achievable. No matter what it is, as long as you keep going forward, you want to lose weight, it doesn't matter if it takes 2 years, just keep going, just don't stop, just keep going, take little steps, do it. Whatever you want to do, you will reach your destination. There's no way you won't, 100% guaranteed you will reach it if just keep going, keep doing it, just keep doing it. And so I told myself, you know what? I did something impossible. And I'm sure if I've set my mind to it, I can do the impossible. I can beat this disease. And I said, hey, you know what? I'm gonna start learning as much as I can about this. And I love to read anyway, right? So it was very natural for me. And every night after I come back, I would spend 2 to 3 hours just reading and trying to figure this thing out. And everything that I read told me arthritis is a disease, is not curable, it's treatable, not curable. But then I said, you know what, forget about arthritis. For me, I don't really know anything about this disease. All I know is what I see, which is the inflammation. It's inflammation. And so I started to focus on inflammation, trying to understand inflammation. And as I read more and more about inflammation, I realized that inflammation was a cause of many diseases, not just arthritis. In fact, even heart disease is not actually cholesterol; it's actually inflammation that gets everything clogged up as it passes through. Alzheimer's. In fact, most diseases that we face is due to some form of inflammation. And then I realized the body is the best doctor. and from what I read. And basically the body is trying to heal all this toxins and whatever is in there that we do. But sometimes it just gets overloaded, and it can't cope. And I think that's when I realized that was really what I needed to start to do, was to get myself in balance. And then I started to look at things, that anything to understand inflammation, like how do you reduce inflammation. And so I started looking at studies, right? And not just articles online, because there's a lot of misinformation, but I started looking at medical journals, at studies where they've done, extensive study and things like that. And one of the things I realized was this um, that actually it was our stress. Stress was one of the main things, that causes a lot of imbalances in our body. Until today, I think people don't understand exactly what the connection is. And so I said, all right, fine, I will cut down on my stress. And so what I started to do was I started to take a back seat, and I started to just, yes, I know I have to work very hard, but I work less. I travel a lot. I go for holidays. I don't know whether I work more or I go for holidays more. People say, hey, do you even work? But I figured the amount of money I was spending on medication, I could spend that on fantastic holidays. And so until today, I still do that. I take easily a week, 2 weeks off a month, and I do something. And then also, not just in terms of that, reducing stress, I realized diet had a very big part to play in it. And so I decided to look at what were the things in our diet which caused inflammation. And I think there's a body of evidence out there that says, things like gluten, and, whether that's real or not, I don't know, but I started to cut it out. Sugar, I think, is a very, very important component. I think I saw such a dramatic change after I cut sugar out completely, from and then I started to cut out everything that was processed, or as much as I could of things that were processed. I'm a carnivore, so meat was the next thing on the list, but I love meat. So I've cut down the amount of meat that I eat. I still eat meat, but actually not in the kind of amounts that I eat. I mean, it's more like a few pieces. I love a good grill. Until today, a grill. I'll do a nice grill or a steak or whatever for my family, but I will consume very little. But that's also helped a lot. But really, even carbohydrates, anything that translates into fat, and anything that stores fat was something that I started to look at. And just by working on those little things, and getting more sleep, actually trying to sleep more, I realized that, I wasn't suffering as much. In fact, actually, the last time I took the last jab I took of this symphony was before I climbed Everest. I've never taken anything after that. I've not taken anything, not methotrexate.
And when was that? When was that? Just so that viewers also have an
This
idea.
was about 3 years
When
ago.
was Mount Everest? Okay.
Yeah, about 3 years ago.
Okay.
In September or something. And so I found that, oh my God, just these little things, already
Makes such a difference.
I mean, I did have some niggling pains here and there, but it was nowhere to the extent, I didn't need painkillers, I didn't need anything. And so when I saw this dramatic change in just a few months of actually doing this, and I was very lucky because eventually I also met a very nice friend who had practiced veganism and things like that, and she was able to share a lot of these things about me. I'm not a vegan, by the way, but someone who's been through this journey of she had some her name is Alexia. She had some problems with her intestine or whatever, and that actually transformed her life, the way her food
Eating
regime and what
habits
she was
change.
eating. So really, how I started to consume and what I started to consume within actually 3 months showed an amazing change. I started to lose weight. I started to feel better. I started to feel fresher, but I didn't suffer so much. I mean, I was getting the pain, but it was manageable. And then I read this article by, I think he was a Japanese guy, Nobel Prize winner in 2019 or 17 or something like that. And he spoke about a topic called hypothagy, whatever, it's basically it has to do with fasting. And it's basically where your body eats itself technically, and I thought, wow, and it's not like intermittent fasting or it's not something like that. It was like proper fasting, 24 hours, 36 hours, 72 hours, and the benefits of it. And I started to study more and more about fasting. And as I studied more and more about fasting, I realized that this is an ancient knowledge. Most civilizations, most religions advocate fasting. Christianity does, Islam does, Hinduism does, even Taoism has elements of fasting in it. And I thought, wow, this is amazing, and I started doing it. It was so tough, Shailaja, for someone who loves food like me. That it was probably harder than climbing Everest, to forego, especially when you see all this food, uh, and you're being tempted. I tell you, it's really tough. But and you used to get something called being hangry when you're hungry, and then, I used to be so
You
intolerable
get
at the
angry.
office. Yeah, it's called hangry. Apparently, it's a thing
Yes.
when you're hungry. But
I'm sure that's well
initially it
documented.
takes. Yes, initially it takes it's a bit difficult, but after a while your body gets used to it, and after a few months, your system just naturally will eat when it needs to eat, So, but fasting has been one of the most um, amazing things because immediately I could see the change, and I felt so much better after I started practicing fasting. So sometimes I fast a day, sometimes I fast 2 days, sometimes it can even be 3 days, sometimes I don't fast, sometimes I eat. And so now my body actually regulates itself. I don't need to over consume. And so from 120 kilos when I started my journey up Everest, I'm now around 70. That's quite a lot over the years.
Like 50
That
kilos.
Yeah, yeah, I was obese.
Oh
I mean,
my
if you scroll down
God.
on my
Oh my
Instagram, far enough,
God.
you'll see how fat I am.
But
But
50 kilos is a lot by any
I
standards.
was a size 44, waistline. And today I'm a size 30, 32 sometimes, in between that range. So that's quite big, quite, some people say
Huge.
I'm half the man I used to be.
But this is in a good way.
Yes, in a good way. But but fasting, tremendously changed everything. And I think pretty soon, I think my the rheumatologist at the hospital Pantai and all of that, they were very surprised, and they were saying, "Hey, what's happening with you? You're suddenly not having all these symptoms, and this is what's going on with you?" So I haven't seen my rheumatologist since then. Uh, uh, and then, of course, it was the Arthritis Foundation found out about it, and they sent you maybe to interview me. I think we did that interview a
Yeah.
few years ago. I thought that was
Yes.
incredible. But what that did, what this has given me is a new lease of life, So after that, what's happened in the last 3 years has been someone who wants to squeeze every minute of every day, because when you come from a place where you don't know if you're going to be able to walk, or even live without pain, and you've somehow found a way through it, what you want to do? You just want to go out and you want to do everything. So, what I started, I've climbed so many mountains since then. I've climbed mountains in the Himalayas, Patagonia, the Andes. I jump off aeroplanes, buildings, I skydive, hang glide, scuba dive the deepest depths of the ocean that I can possibly do. I've been able to go back to enjoying my car racing, drifting, whitewater rafting, and I've done expeditions to Antarctica. Swam with
Amazing.
whales
Really
last year
amazing.
in Tonga, the South Pacific. And
Absolutely amazing.
yeah, and it's simply because you just tend to appreciate life. You suddenly have an appreciation of life, and how we sometimes we focused on things that actually aren't important, and actually the stress that comes from it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, David, thank you. But I'm going to take you back a little bit because this whole diet and fasting is absolutely brilliant because a lot of people struggle with it, right? And I just want to
Yes.
have a few more questions to just go a little bit to delve a little bit into it. So, if you could just tell me like 5 things that you cut out of your diet.
Okay, the first thing was sugar.
Okay.
Sugar was very, very important to cut
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
Gluten,
Okay.
definitely. I think I don't know, because there's a theory it does, there's a theory it doesn't, but I can only
Okay.
experiment on my own body. I'm a guinea pig, so
Correct.
gluten definitely. And then you want to take out meat if that's possible, out of your
Meat.
system. Um, Dairy. Oh yeah, I forgot dairy. Oh my God, dairy is one of the biggest things, that cause inflammation for me. I know, because sometimes even when you go back into sometimes you go somewhere and there's some dairy in there, and automatically that day I know I don't feel so good in my joints. So dairy is something that really really must go. Um, and as much as possible, anything that's processed, try not to take processed food, and try to you know I mean, I know I haven't spoken about alcohol and meat, but it's on the list. Personally, I have cut down on alcohol a lot. Not that I like to drink very much, but socially I do, like whatever it is that I am. So I can't say that, hey, you know what, I cut alcohol. Although definitely alcohol is one of those things. I've cut it down quite considerably. And red meat as well. Red meat, I think I can tell just by cutting down on the amount of red meat that I eat. So these are the things.
And when you say you also mentioned carbohydrates. So, what kind of carbohydrates did you cut down? Like, could
Well,
it
I
be
think
defined
when I
carbohydrates?
when I say carbs, I think I should be.
More
I think
specific.
processed carbs. Like
Okay.
white rice to a large extent is
Yeah.
processed. So at
Okay.
home we do eat rice, but we eat brown rice,
Okay.
unprocessed brown rice. So if it was whole grain breads, but I tend to cut breads out quite a lot. I eat very little rice anyway. So now,
Okay.
yeah.
So, that's really great information for anybody who's listening because people want to know exactly like what you cut out and what you couldn't. So I just want to say hello. There's a Christy there who's been saying hello, and there's Erica who's been commenting as well. Erica's from the US. So she says she totally agrees with the dietary changes, and she also suffered severe atopic diseases, tremendous difficulty with asthma, and in extreme eczema. Yeah, so she says she reduced stress with yoga and some dietary changes that completely changed her life. Yeah, so she says people are very reluctant to make these changes. I have to agree with her because I always say that I think food is one of the hardest things for people to change and control. So, yeah, I mean, I think David's back was against the wall, and he made these changes. But I think for other people, it's kind of much harder to make these changes. But like, and then she's also gone on to say that she can completely resonate with what you're saying, having come through extreme difficulty and pain. So I guess there are people who have similarly experienced huge changes in their life due to dietary changes and shifts in terms of lifestyle. Yeah. So I also wanted this conversation really badly because I don't think people realize how important these, I mean, these are like everyday things, right? Eat properly, sleep well, take enough rest, but actually we don't do it, right? The greatest, like they say over the counter medication, like is like antidepressants. And then, you also have sleep medication. People are unable to sleep. So these things that we think are so everyday and normal, we actually don't follow them. So important to know how they deeply affect our health. So
Yeah, but I
I
also
also
think,
want,
sorry, Shailaja, to interrupt.
no, no, no.
But I think equally, fasting is something that
Yeah,
really
I'm
people
going
should
into
think
that,
about.
David. But I want to go into diet a little bit also, because diet is
Yes,
also so key, and
absolutely.
people struggle with diet. Yeah, I personally
And
struggle with diet as
exercise.
well. I guess that's why I'm so keen on this topic as well. So I want to ask you now. We went over exactly what you left out of your diet, but
I
I
left out
also
exercise though, sorry,
no, no,
because
no, no.
that's a
Wait, David
very
will
big
go there.
part.
But I just want to delve a little bit more on diet, as in how did you actually bring yourself to make these changes? Yeah, I remember you telling me that you were a huge foodie, and it was just so hard for you to make these changes, right? And so, like, where do you get the will or the resolve, like, just to inspire everybody listening, that it's possible to make these dietary changes? How did you do that? Like, give
It's
up sugar. I mean, it's easy to say give up sugar, but sugar is
Shalaja,
like
I still
everything in
struggle.
dessert. Okay, that's so good
I
to
tell you, I
hear.
cook. Shalaja, if you've ever eaten my cooking, you must come and try. I tell you, I swear to you, I make the best curries in the world. I cook. I love to cook. And and I'm quite versatile. So, weekends I cook for the family and all that. So I love food. I love flavors. I love aromas, and so it is tough. But I think because I come from a perspective where I've been in so much of pain,
Okay,
I
you
mean,
appreciate your health more than
yeah,
sugar,
if
the dessert
you
dangling in front of
if
you.
anyone has had arthritis to the level
Okay,
that I've had, uh,
okay,
you never want to feel that again. You never want to go through that pain again. And sometimes I look at a cream puff and I go,
okay,
oh, my darling, I want you so much. I keep thinking of the pain and go, no, no, no.
okay,
Yeah. So,
okay. So the
basically,
pain
those are
keeps
the
you
kind of
on
changes,
track.
right? So perhaps
Yeah,
for me, I just have to remember what it was like, and it's easier to forego.
yeah, because you can sit here and say, so I cut out this, 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 and everybody's wondering, like, how the hell did you do that, right? Like, was that easy? Was that hard? I mean, it's good to know that you struggle with it as well, and you still struggle with it, and you would still want that cream puff. Okay, so everybody out there, it's a hard thing, but it's doing the right thing, right?
But
And
the other thing that people should think about really is, especially with diet and fasting and exercise, is you feel younger. So I'm
yeah,
52 years old, and I can tell you, even the way that I feel inside, I feel like I'm in my 20s. What I can do, I feel like I could do when I was in my 20s. Things that I couldn't do
absolutely,
even in my 30s and the 40s. That
yeah,
there's such an amazing turnaround, um, by incorporating a good diet,
these changes,
fasting, and
yeah.
exercise. It's
Okay,
amazing.
we're going into fasting and exercise, but we just have some questions here on sugar. So that's my cousin Lakshmi from Singapore. She says very inspiring. But did cutting out sugar affect the brain functions, focus, memory? I'm hoping in a good way. Did you feel any
Okay.
sort of?
Actually, you know what? I don't know if cutting sugar out actually affects the brain, because I find myself at a much working at a much higher level now, in my capacity.
Okay,
As I said, I run a law firm. It's quite a big law firm. I run companies. I go to court. I'm still a court-going lawyer, and I'm involved in projects, and the kind of processing that goes through there. Uh, I feel I'm at the top of my game. So I don't think, if anything, it's actually made it. I don't feel cluttered. I don't feel lazy. I don't feel tired. I don't have that fatigue,
yeah,
mental fatigue. I don't know if
absolutely.
it's the diet or the fasting or whatever, but I can't. I don't think that just sugar does that. I don't know.
No, I really think okay, like in a previous conversation with somebody, we were talking about all these things, and we said that's intellectual yoga where you know the right things in your mind. So, I mean, I'm also just talking all this intellectually. It's not like I practice it 100%, but I truly believe that we all eat much more than we need to, and that food really only makes us like heavy, and like we eat a full meal. Like we have these for festivals and all that, we have these sadhyas, we call them. So after a sadhya, what can you do? You can only sleep after that. So I'm thinking that if we don't eat the right foods, I mean, it's really not fuel or energy, that it actually makes us like kind of lazy and is unable to move and do very much. So I'm of the opinion that the less we eat, I think it's really better for our systems. And of course, the quality of what we eat is important as well. So I
Especially,
have a tell me.
we're like, I know you
Sorry.
didn't eat, you're gonna faint, you're gonna die, you have to
Yeah,
eat,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
here's another
Yeah,
idli,
exactly. Yeah, so
you know.
even like my son, I mean, people might think I'm a terrible parent. I'm saying all this on, open forums, but he doesn't eat breakfast before he goes to school, and I'm like, okay, if you're not hungry, don't eat. I mean, I think when he's hungry, he'll just eat. So, I mean, I really think we should not encourage. Like somebody said, this whole concept of eating 3 meals and 5 snacks is really overrated, and it's really too much food. Okay, so I'm going to move on from here. So there's a comment I want to take from Saras. You should be knowing Saras Shivanand, Mr. Shiva. I think it was actually through Mr. Shiva from Arthritis Foundation that
Hi Shiva.
we met as well. Yeah, so that's Saras, his wife here. She says, David,
Hi
you did
Saras.
what an arthritis patient would not even think of doing, not for the faint-hearted. Okay, so yeah. So we're going to go into fasting now. So when you say you do 24-hour fasting, 36 hour, a lot of people are interested in the whole fasting. What do you have during those fasts? Like, is it like green tea fasting, only water fasting, or do you have something else in the fasting? And also, how often do you do these fasts?
Okay, so of
How did
course,
you begin?
initially I
From
started with one meal a day, which was a struggle. And in fact,
okay,
most days I actually have one meal.
okay,
Even when I'm not fasting, it's
okay,
generally one meal. I mean, I'm at that stage where it's not like a must. So some days, I go for dinner, somebody invites me, or I go for a party or something, and there's food. Then, I will eat a little bit in moderation. So it's not like a hard and fast rule, but on
okay.
average, if I eat, it's one meal, and I like lunch, and it's
Yeah,
an average lunch. So it's not like you load.
yeah,
I don't load everything. I used to be when I used to be hungry, and if I fasted in like 24 hours, I'd be like, God, I can't wait for lunch, and then I would just plop that plate up to the max as much as I could eat, and then I would eat. But as time went by and I got used to it and my body got used to it, and now I realize I eat because my body needs it, to sustain itself. And so I eat portions that are average. So if it was an average meal, let's say lunch, let's say, something, it would be that kind of meal, except I take more vegetables. I take more, things with more nutrients in it. So yeah, so I would focus on what I eat in that meal, even but even the portions are not very big. And I was very surprised. I've been doing this for 3 years now, and I don't look like I'm a skinny guy. I don't look like I'm like skinny or
but
like.
you lost 50 kilos.
Yeah, but I'm not like I'm not a guy like that's like starving. Like the images that you see in Africa and things like that. Because that's you ask my mother will say, hey, you're gonna be bones. But I have an Indian mother as well. Do
Of
you know what I
course,
mean? So
of course.
you know, um, and but after a while, you get used to it. So generally, I find I can function quite well with one meal. But you know what? I don't want it to be regimented, because I think one of the things that I found, that if you say I'm going to be regimented about something, or if it's a diet, or if it's a plan or something like that, it's very hard to live up to.
Yeah,
But I
yeah,
think as you go with your urge, maybe sometimes, okay, fine, indulge, have that banana leaf if that's going to make you happy. don't say, hey, I'm not going to do that. But by and large, try to stick to that as much as possible. And after a while, you get used to it. Now, in terms of fasting, so I started with what would you call maybe intermittent fasting, and then I progressed to one meal a day, and then I tried 24 hours, which means that I would eat lunch and then I would wait 24 hours, which is basically the
Next day.
one meal a day. So if you're already used to one meal a day, and trust me, it gets easier to do that.
But what
Then
would
what
you eat
happens
in
is
between that
you
time?
can
Like
then expand
no
that to
drink?
1.5 days.
Okay.
So if you eat lunch today, maybe you try dinner. But I'm not saying this every day, right? So if I do
Yeah, absolutely.
if I do a 2 or 3 day fast, it might be once in 2 weeks or once in three
Once in two
weeks.
weeks.
I don't,
That's
it's
quite
not like,
often.
yeah, so I do like 1 or 2 days or 3 days. If I do 3 days, I'll do it like maybe 2 weeks once or 3 weeks once. If I do it one day, then every other 3 or 4 days once I can do it, no problem. It's 24-hour, 48-hour ones, not an issue. But the but the thing about the 3 day fasts are, um, it's quite difficult after the first 24 hours, but I
Okay.
think if you are able to sustain yourself, and I think you understand that a lot of this is mental in your mind, and that hunger, is something that is, basically once your body understands what it's doing, it works itself. So sugar is actually a big thing because sugar makes you hungry, and so if you cut out sugar, it's actually a lot easier. Now, I'll come to the point about what kind of fasting is it, is it water fasting and things like that? No, it's not. I mean, I don't know lah, to be honest with you, I'm not a doctor. I'm not, don't get me wrong. I'm
Yeah.
just someone who's tried something and
Yeah.
it seems to have worked, and my
Yeah.
doctors say that it's worked, and I know it has worked. So, but I do know that, when you so like I don't so I consume a lot of water, but I also take things like coffee and tea, to supplement, not supplement, because I like coffee. As I said, it must be something like, for me, I think it's something I can manage. So I have coffee, I have tea. Of course, no sugar, no dairy, so it's black. There's no milk, there's no nothing. And then, I eat one meal a day. At some days, I eat 2 meals. Some days I fast 2 days, and it's fine, and then that's what I mean by fasting that I
No,
do.
it's
The
great.
fasting that I
No, it's great. I mean, even in intermittent fasting, what they tell you is also like, no dairy and, no sugar. So if you drink black coffee or, you drink green tea, no milk, no
But I
sugar,
think it's very
it's kind
important
of
to
okay.
avoid the 36 hour, or the 2 day, 3 day fasts. I think,
What did you
uh,
find the shifts in your life once you did that?
yeah, yeah, no, definitely. I find that, when I do that, proper fasting, it helps. And I don't really know anything about meditation or all of that, but I find that actually when I'm in that state, when I'm able to focus a lot better, and so I take that time to meditate. As I said, I believe in spirituality. I believe in God, and I find that when I'm in, it just happens to help. I just feel. Don't ask me how, but it just feels a clearer mind,
Yeah,
to be able to do
absolutely.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know the science behind that. I just tell you, I can tell you how it
Okay. No,
feels.
it's fine. Yeah. So basically, your fasts are, black, either coffee or tea, water, and 24, 36 hours. You started with 24. So this is for those of you who are interested in fasting and how you get started. But I think
Yeah.
intermittent fasting, one meal a day, would kind of help to set up towards that.
Yeah. So now I do 72 hours every 2 or 3 weeks,
Okay.
of fasting. Yeah, every 2 or 3 weeks, so not every day.
So,
But on
so,
average,
so
the
which part
daily.
is the hardest? Is it the first part or the last part, or every part of it?
I think the last part, it gets harder. The 24 hours, after a while, you get used to it very easily, and you don't, you know. 48 hours, you see food, you're like, damn, I need to.
So what do you
But
do?
then
Like you don't go
36.
out to dinners or parties, you see food and say
Well,
no, or you just
most
stay home and hibernate?
well, I don't have the luxury of doing that. I go to events and I'm a sociable person. But as I said, if it happens and I'm out, and if I have to eat, I eat. But then when I have 2 or 3 days that I'm at home or I don't really
Okay.
go out that much, then it's a lot easier to do that. And it's also easier to do that during the weekday than weekends for some
Okay.
reason.
Yeah.
But yeah, that really
Okay.
is very impactful. The 3 days, the 2 days, the 3 days
Of
that I
fasting.
do every fortnight
Okay.
is very
And
impactful.
yeah. So then again, one thing you often hear is, okay, you feel very weak, you feel very tired. So I just want to ask you, how do you feel physically during the
How
three
do I
days of
feel
fasting?
physically? Oh, I physically, yeah. So, physically, I've been in the best shape. I'm in the best shape of my life, I jump out of, I went sort of diving with whales, like a youngster, just jumping into the water. I play football, and maybe in the old days, I just, now I can play like, a full game without actually feeling it. So I'm very active. I still
But
find
during the fasting time, the 3 days of fasting, do you feel like, like tired, you want to sleep, or you feel reasonable energy, you can work, or you
actually, you
feel
know what,
better?
I during the days that I fast is actually the days that I do my, I have a gym at home. I have a privilege of having a gym at home.
Yeah.
And but I do my weight training or circuit training actually when I fast. So
So, so there's no excuse of having no energy and not able to get out of bed,
no,
and
we have so much
we
fat
are
to
able
burn.
to function.
The body has so much fat to
Okay, so
burn.
that's not an excuse.
So much
Okay, next
energy.
question. Okay, so I said we would go to the exercise. That's my favorite one as well. So, yeah. So, how did you make these exercise changes? How did they start? What do you do? What is your exercise regime?
Okay. So, when you have um, arthritis, it's not as easy as it is for other people because especially if you've had it for a long time, your joints are just permanently in a way that can't you can't you just can't beat it. But you can work around it. So I started, like everybody else, going on YouTube and getting this physical trainer, watching at the gym, and they'll tell you, "Oh, I can do this," and then you look at them, they're all like hacks. You know what I mean? And then I was very disappointed because I tried to do some of the basic things, and I put it in all these things that they tell you, this curls and that and this and that. So I started by actually saying, you know what, forget that. Okay, as I said, take one step, take one step, and away you go. And so what I started to do was just very basic things, right? So if I could do a 5 push-ups, I would do 5 push-ups. If I could just run a little bit for 1 minute and then walk like 5 minutes, it was fine. You know what I mean? But I just kept doing it. So soon the 5 push-ups became 6 push-ups, became 7 push-ups, became, just over 2 years, you put a
Adding
lot of
on.
effort. And pretty soon you can do 15, 100, then the rest of the muscles become stronger. So initially it was just very basic general exercises that strengthen the muscles. I started to work on the core. I realized that the core was very weak. And I realized I started hiking better. And hiking was
Some reason I can't hear you so well, David. Sorry. Just checking if can you all hear him?
can you hear
Is it
me?
clear? Yeah, now it's clear. It just kept going on and off. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I'm
Just
sorry.
sorry. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Now it's
Yeah,
very clear.
so you
Yeah.
start with the little things. You start slow, just do some walking and then move that hiking, do it more intense, keep increasing, just one step at a time. If you can do 5 push-ups, hey, you know what, just make sure every day do the 5 push-ups and then at one point try 6. And trust me, you keep going, right? Listen, this is 3 years. It's not an overnight thing. It's not, don't get disappointed by the YouTube videos where somebody does it like, what was it? Indian superstar that, went obese for a movie and then he lost like some Khan, something,
Was it Amir Khan?
yeah, in 6 months, I mean, don't, just take it at your own pace. There's a lot of time. Like I said, my time that was an amazing thing because I know that if you just keep doing it and just keep focusing on the next step and just keep doing it, eventually, guaranteed you will get there, you know. And so after about a year, I realized, oh my God, I was able to do so many things. And after about a year, I realized my core was strong, my arms were strong, my legs were strong. And even though I had to manage to do exercises that in a way that I could because of my joints, it's not like, for example, people like to do burpees, okay? But I can't do burpees, not with my knees, not with my back, So I had to find other things to be able to do that work the same group of muscles, sort of a high intensity. How did you do that? How do you do that? So what I did was I started to say, okay, I started to do, this RPM bicycle. I got myself an RPM bicycle and I put a music on, maybe an album, that lasts about 45 minutes, an hour, something that's a mixtape, which has fast beats, slow beats. And then I would cycle to that, and I found that was very, very good in terms of that intensity. And a little bit of running. I don't do a lot of running, but cycling was a very, very good thing for someone like me. And so I managed around those things to have the high intensity part of it. And then I was also starting to do weights. So after a year of just doing the basic things, the push-ups, the sit-ups, not sit-ups, but more crunches, not crunches rather. What do you call it? For the core exercises. God, I've got a mental block right now.
That's okay.
But yeah, and after about a year, for someone who's really fat, it's not so easy, as I said. So it took a while to get all of this, the hiking and all that. And then after about a year, I felt my core was stronger, my arms, my chest, my back, my legs. And then I started doing weights, and again, it started with small weights, longer repetitions as much as I could. And then I increased the level of weights, and that really helped. So with the ability to do some high intensity exercises, and now having the strength to be able to do weights like I couldn't do before because of my back, my knees, and all of that. Now the muscles around it found a way to, yeah. And so now I do weights. I do weights like normal, like you see them on YouTube. Yeah, I do those kind of circuit training, circuit exercises, repetitions. So that's to me, that's how I got into the regime, right? So now, as I said, over 3 years, your physique slowly changes. It's not like something that for me is easy to do, and like for most of us, because we work as well. It's not like especially for someone like me, it's not like I come home at 5 o'clock every day and I have the luxury of hey, I'm going to go to the gym, or you know what I mean. I don't have that luxury, and so whenever I can, it might be 2 days a week, maybe, if I'm lucky. But those 2 days I actually do it. I actually go through a full routine until fatigue, and really that's what I do.
That's great. So before we wind up, I just wanted to ask you a sample of what do you eat every day, like your one
What
meal a
would I
day.
eat?
What kind of food? Yeah.
So as I said, I don't eat bread so much. In fact, at all, I try to avoid it. But again, if somebody presents it, you go for dinner and you have a burger there, you just eat it. It doesn't matter. But by choice, I would cut out. I love curry, but instead of rice, I would add vegetables. I would add a lot of tofu for protein rather than protein. So I eat a lot of. I'm not a vegan. Sometimes some eggs, but even then, I try to cut down eggs as much as I can. And so if it was a curry and there was some, meat in it, or there was some fish, but mostly I try to eat more fish. I try to cut down on red meat
Okay.
a lot.
Okay. Okay.
Because why I'm saying that is, in real life, for people like us who work and things like that, it's not like you come, you finish court, you come back and you're going to find a vegan restaurant there, and somebody going to cook for you the way that you want to eat, and you're going to find quinoa or whatever. It doesn't work that way. In real life, you go for meetings and some lunch meetings or wherever you go, and then you just, sometimes it might be a plate of something, and you just don't eat the carbs as much as you do when you eat the vegetables, or you tell them, instead of the fries, can I have some vegetables, sauteed and things like that. So basically, in real life, that's what happens. But when I'm at home, again, it's mostly more fruit, vegetables, tofu, and things like that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's good to know also, because most people will, are working, and then they're like, we don't have the ability to eat right. But it's good to know that you can just cut out the carbs, cut out the rice, and have everything else.
Yes.
So I think we have the call coming from behind you.
Yes.
But I just had this one last question. For somebody who's recently diagnosed with some kind of autoimmune disorder, right? What would your advice be
Sorry, what would my advice be to?
to someone who's recently diagnosed with an
Oh,
autoimmune disorder?
okay. I think the first thing to do is really to understand. It's not the end of the world. You know. I mean, of course, I'm never going to say don't follow your doctor's advice. I'm not saying, hey, just, this is the way. I'm not qualified to say that. I think my doctors played a very, very big role, an important role in helping me to mitigate the effects of this disease. And I think, I have to thank the doctors who treated me over the years, um, for helping me, at least mitigate the thing. So listen to your doctors, but, you know, look out, learn, and see what works for you. I'm just sharing what works for me. And but I can almost guarantee you that, you need to cut your stress out. Don't try, because a lesson I learned is, that, um, at the end of the day, chasing things that we doesn't bring us, chasing wealth or chasing success or fame or whatever, has its cost, in many ways. And even if you don't do that, sometimes, life has a way of just throwing something at you, no matter where you are, whether you're poor, whether you're
Correct.
rich or whatever, it doesn't matter how much, like what
Yeah.
happened, with my wife.
Correct.
Sometimes life has a way of just hitting you with something, and it's not so easy to say, oh, you know what, I'm going to manage my stress. But you have to acknowledge that, you need to do that, because you need to do that, to take care of yourself, because most of us have people that we're responsible for. And so, based on that responsibility, I think it's very important that you that one actually looks at that responsibility. Like for me, I had to think about my children. I had to think about what I was going to do. That, for many years, was what happens if the disease came back to my wife, and what if I can't work, or something happens to me, because they will tell you, if you have arthritis, your chances of getting a heart attack is almost double, and everything becomes more
Well,
prevalent. So you try not to be afraid, of this thing. Try not to be beaten by this thing. Don't give up. Just keep fighting it. Find a way. Live better, and see where you get. I wouldn't advise you and say, hey, don't believe the doctors. And no, 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 no. Please don't do that. I think they played a very, very important role in mitigating this thing. But try lifestyle changes might help.
and your last philosophy, that this has been a huge, like it has really impacted your life, this whole journey. So just what you have learned from it and what you would like to share.
I think, I learned a very important lesson. I told you, going up that mountain and a bigger one coming down the mountain. The lesson I learned going up the mountain was, you can make the impossible. You can do anything if you just keep going. Just keep going. It doesn't matter how long it takes. Just keep going. You will get there. It's guaranteed. The lesson I learned coming down the mountain was perhaps more important. For that, I need to tell you a little bit about my background. I was a waiter who put my way through law school. I came from a maybe lower middle class family, and in the struggle over the years to get to where I am. Perhaps you um, think that your life changes when you have a lot of money, wealth, maybe not money but wealth. And it's very natural for people to feel that way, and I felt that way too. But as I was coming down the mountain, I realized that while to a large extent, yes, I worked really hard and I earned and accumulated the wealth. But I realized that I spent so much of time working to maintain this idea of this wealth that, so afraid that what would happen if I lose everything, so you end up like, working, stressing out about things, stressing out so much. And I understand that, don't get me wrong. Yeah, we all have children, we all worry about their future, we all worry about their education and all these things. But I think at some point in time, I think it's important just to let go, And so as I came down the mountain, I realized that, hey, you know what? I slept on the ground. I slept on, in little boxes, mats, dust. I ate food that was, up the mountain, there's no gourmet cooking. They carry everything up, it's like, oh my God, I tell you, really, the quality of the food, was not anywhere near what you would expect it to be. And I walked most of the time and 9 days. So when I came down, I realized, you know what, actually, it's okay. I could lose everything tomorrow. But you know what? I could rent a room, maybe go to my mother's house. Maybe she'll cook something for me. I could take a bus. I could cycle. I would still eat roti canai and teh tarik and nasi lemak, which I like. Life would still be okay. You know what I mean? Life would still be okay. I lived like that before. It's not the end of the. And when I was able to have that, I was able to tell myself, it's okay. Work for what you need, and go out, take your family out, go for holidays, take them out, enjoy your life. Go climb a mountain, go fishing, sit by the sea, swim. Do whatever you can, and just spend time. And what that's transformed my life in a way is, my relationship with my children improved, my relationship with others improved, my understanding of life has improved. So I think that was a bigger lesson that I learned coming down that mountain. That's perhaps the philosophy that I can share.
Not to hold on so tightly, that it will still be okay. So I can't sum it up any better than what David just has. So we're going to leave it at that. But I think the words that are going to stay with us, at least for me, will be the keep moving forward. And, there's just that one step forward. I think that is so impactful. I think a lot of us have all these goals, but then somewhere along the way, we just give up. And I think, like what you said, just keep going, right? Just take that one step and you'll just
My
get there at some point.
My hashtag is keep going forward one step at a time. Keep going forward one step at a time. That was 9 days. That was in my head. Keep going forward one step at a time.
Yeah. So there's Mr. Shiva. He says candid sharing, useful tips to complement. He has some arthritis issues as well. Yeah. So remedy to better living with arthritis, certainly. And I think it's not just arthritis, but like you said, inflammation is the cause of so many diseases, and stress as well, if I may add. So really learning to manage all these factors is going to help us all live much better. So thank you so much, David, for your time. From your
Thank you.
extremely busy schedule and all the million things that you do, you were very gracious about it when I approached you. And it's always a pleasure and very inspiring to talk to you.
Thank you, Shailaja.
And thank you all for being here with your constant comments and your questions. I took most of them, but yeah. So we'll hope we'll get David at some other point. Yeah. Thank you all.
Thank you.